It's mini PC season for me at Kit Guru. I recently reviewed the Lever Z5 Plus, and today we have another tiny system on the desk to look at. This is the A7 by Geekom. Again, let's see if good things come in small packages. Hi guys, I'm Matt and welcome to Kit Guru. So this time around, we've upped the ante a little bit. The Geekom A7 on the desk in front of me is packing a bit more firepower than the previous mini PC that I looked at. The model that I have for review retails for £899, but is currently on sale for £799 on Geekom's UK website. There are two base models of the A7 available. One based around the Ryzen 7940HS CPU and the other the 7940HS CPU. We're going to be focusing in on the latter of those two today. The A7 strikes me as Geekom's attempt at producing a Windows-based Mac Mini lookalike. Now, I originally received this PC for review a while ago now, but the first model that's sent out to me by Geekom completely died during a PC Mark X benchmark run. It shut down midway through running the test and it never ever booted back up again. I had it apart, I looked at it, I checked it over, and I sent the unit back to Geekom for testing, but I haven't had it confirmed what the issue was yet. It looked to me like it was a power issue, but until we hear back, I can't say for sure. In fairness to Geekom though, they got a replacement out to me relatively quickly, and this new unit, I've tested it all the same, exactly the same test, this new unit's been fine. Let's go through all of the specs, the design and the performance and see how this thing stacks up against the Lever Z5 Plus that I looked at a few weeks ago. So for the £799 asking price, or £899 when it's not on sale, you get the following specs. The CPU, as I mentioned, is the Ryzen 9-7940HS. This is a pretty high-end laptop processor. It's got 8 cores and 16 threads running at a base clock speed of 4 GHz, and it's capable of boosting up to 5.2 GHz. It runs on a base power of 35 watts, but it can boost up to 54 watts when the workload demands a bit more power. It's got Radeon 780M graphics built in, and I'm going to see how that handles some gaming and some video editing and stuff like that later in the video. The A7 contains DDR5 memory, 32 gigs of it, running at 5,600 megatransfers. The kit is from Crucial, to be precise. It's the CT16G56C4-6S5. Don't you just love memory naming? It's dual channel and it's made up of two 16GB modules. That's both slots populated on the custom board that's inside this mini PC. So if an upgrade was ever planned, you'd likely want to replace the whole kit. Storage comes in the form of a 2TB PCI Express 4.0 M.2 NVMe SSD. It's an Acer N5000CM model to be more specific. A quick test with Crystal Diskmark reports the read speeds were around 4,900 megabytes per second and the write speeds were around 4,700 megabytes per second. The A7 has onboard support for Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.2. I/O is pretty good. On the front we have two USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A ports and a 3.5mm headphone jack, alongside the power button, which lights up when the system's on. Around the back, there's the DC port, two HDMI 2.0 ports, one USB 4 Gen 3 Type C port, a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type C port, two USB Type A USB ports, one 3.2 Gen 2 and one 2.0, and then finally, a 2.5 gigabits RJ45 network port, and then on the side you'll find an SD card port, useful for anyone wanting to transfer files from a camera or stuff like that. All of that stuff is packed inside an absolutely tiny 0.47 litres aluminium case. The case is where I drew my initial comparison to a Mac Mini from. I don't have a Mac Mini personally to compare it to, but on looks alone, it's clear to see that Geekom took at least a little bit of inspiration from Apple. The case feels really well made and good quality. It feels solid and looks great. There's venting down each side to help keep the system cool. And the A7 doesn't weigh a whole lot either. It's 429 grams to be more precise. Taking the unit apart to access the board and the components is quite easy. You just remove the 4 rubber feet from the bottom, and then there's 8 screws in total to get access to the SSD, the memory, the Wi-Fi adapter and the rest of the internals. I really like the look of this machine. It looks quite classy, I think. It feels good quality, and it's tiny enough to stick pretty much anywhere you'd want to stick a computer. And just like the lever that I looked at, the A7 also has a few mounting holes on the bottom for easily attaching it to a wall or under a desk or something like that.
Lights, camera, action, we ready to roll. All right, places, everybody, let's put on a good show. Sick of your talking, you got the wrong living legend, lethal weapon, mastermind, big time.
The A7 comes with Windows 11 Pro pre-installed, and as usual, the only thing I've done prior to testing this thing out is to update the OS to the latest version. Oh, and we're running the latest version at the time of recording of AMD's Adrenalin software, which is version 24.3.1. Let's kick things off with looking at the performance then with a few synthetic benchmarks, using the ECS Lever Z5 Plus as a comparison, as that's the closest thing to this that I've reviewed recently. But bear in mind as we head through the charts that the A7 is £200 to £300 more expensive than that Z5 Plus, depending on if it's on sale or not. Starting off with Cinebench multi-core then, and the difference in CPU capabilities is immediately apparent when running a multi-core benchmark. The Ryzen 9-7940HS recorded an average score from 3 runs of 15,453 points, dwarfing the 5,805 points recorded by the Core i5. Moving into the single core Cinebench results then, and they were a little tighter. Even though ultimately ending with the same story, the Ryzen CPU recorded a score of 1,811 points, putting it roughly 250 points ahead of the i5, which came in at 1,556 points. 3D Mark Time Spy again highlights the pretty massive difference in performance between these two systems. Both the CPU and GPU scores are worlds apart on the much more powerful and much more expensive Geekom machine. The Geekom machine recorded scores of 10,161 points for the CPU metric and 2,797 points for the integrated graphics. The A7 is more than twice as fast when compared to the Lever Z5 in this test. And moving into AIDA 64 then, and our memory benchmarks here paint a very similar picture, as they were always going to, as the A7 is running DDR5 memory as opposed to the DDR4 found in the Lever. Read speeds came in at 61,735 megabytes per second, and write speeds were clocked at 85,541 megabytes per second. PC Mark X follows suit then, with the more expensive and more powerful Geekom A7 absolutely wiping the floor with the Lever Z5 Plus. Overall, it scored 7,696 points. In Essentials, we saw a result of 11,436 points. Productivity was 11,018 points, while Content Creation was 9,819 points. Looking at how much power the CPUs are using then, and the CPU package power chart shows that the Ryzen CPU does use a bit more power when under load, but it's still nothing crazy. There was a 45 watt sustained CPU package power reading when running a Cinebench multi-core benchmark, where there was 10 watts at idle. The Intel CPU found in the Lever system used both 20 watts at idle and in Cinebench, likely due to restrictions in some BIOS setting somewhere. All of that extra performance doesn't come for free though. The A7 does put out a lot more heat. The CPU hit a peak of 95 degrees during a Cinebench multi-core benchmark, but it did run a little cooler than the i5 found in the Lever Z5 Plus, sitting at 53 degrees Celsius when idle. The system is very, very quiet, roughly 33 decibels at idle and 38 decibels in a Cinebench multi-core run when measured from about 15 centimeters using my sound meter. Now, while the system is probably more suited to work, I'm a gamer at heart, so I couldn't review this without trying to game on it. Just like the Lever review though, I haven't gone through a 10 game list like I do for a full gaming rig, but rather I've approached the gaming performance in a bit more of a relaxed way, just like I did with that previous mini PC, because they're not full-on gaming PCs after all. So let's dive over to a bit of a different camera angle and I'll talk about how this thing games. If you're looking for a new chair, then you should definitely check out Booley's. I'm currently sat on their Ninja Pro gaming chair, which is one of 3 models from their gaming series alongside the Elite and the Master. So if you're looking for something new to stick in your setup that you can sit on and game and work, then I recommend definitely checking out boolies.co.uk. So here we are testing out the gaming performance of the Geekom A7 mini PC. I originally tried to do this section recording the gameplay footage with OBS, but as it doesn't have a dedicated graphics card, so it doesn't have a dedicated encoder for recording, it kind of struggled and it affected the performance too much. So I switched to doing it this way with the camera so we can get a true kind of impression reflection of what sort of frames you can get. We're in Counter-Strike 2. It's at 1080p. It's at the lowest settings possible. We'll jump in to a practice game with some bots and just see what sort of frame rates we're getting. I've got it up in the top right corner. You probably won't be able to see it because it's quite small on the screen. The mini PC is just there. If you can make it out, you may not be able to see it very well in the video. It's quite small, but yeah, it's just sitting just to the right, bottom right corner of the monitor. So let's jump into a game, see how this thing performs. So here we are in an offline kind of practice match with bots on Counter-Strike 2. The frame rate is at 169 at the moment, 171. It's staying around 160, 170, just went up to 180 then. That's quite impressive for this little PC. Granted, this is not a very demanding game at all, and we're at 1080p lowest. Wow, there's all the enemies there. Let's get a bit of combat. Try and click all the heads. Got them all. So yeah, it dipped down to 130 then. The frame time is about 5 to 6.5 milliseconds. It feels snappy and it feels crisp and it feels like I would be perfectly happy playing this game like this. Obviously, it's not as good of an experience as on a dedicated gaming PC, but if this was all I had, just like I said about the Lever Z5 Plus that I reviewed recently, if this was all I had, then I'd be more than happy with it. Let's move on to a more demanding game. Let's go up to some Call of Duty and see how it handles that. So here we are then in a match, an offline match of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, and straight off the bat, we're getting 99 FPS. It's more than playable. It does feel a little bit laggy, a little bit slow. The frame time is around 10 milliseconds, so it doesn't feel the smoothest, but it's more than playable, much more than playable. We've got the 1% low of around 80 FPS, and the FPS while I'm running around now is between 90 and 100. Let's try and find something to shoot and see how it handles that. The GPU utilization is pinned at almost maximum the entire time, and the CPU utilization is around 25%, which we would expect to see from the Ryzen that's in this system. The bots on my team are too good. They're killing all the enemies. Yeah, so this is more than playable. If I didn't have, like I said in my review of the Lever Z5 Plus, if I didn't have a gaming PC and this was all I had, I'd be more than happy playing this like this. Let's move on to something even more demanding, and I feel like we could push this a bit further. Let's move on to Red Dead Redemption 2. So here we are in Red Dead Redemption 2. It's at 1080p, lowest settings again. We've got AMD FSR 2 on performance mode with the sharpening boosted just a little bit to try and make the game look a bit nicer with all the settings on low. So I'm in the game on my horse and it looks okay. Obviously, it's not as good as playing at 4K and stuff. It's never going to be. But the FPS is 80, 79, 80. And the frame time is 12.5 milliseconds. It looks and feels okay. And this is from this tiny little Geekom mini PC. We'll shoot him, steal his horse. Now I'm wanted for murder. But it's not as good as playing it at 4K, 1440p on a dedicated gaming rig. It was never going to be, but it's playable again. I mean, I'm kind of shocked at how well this system performs gaming-wise. If this was my only thing, just like I said in other reviews, and I've said it already in this review, if this is all I had for gaming, this is better than not gaming, in my opinion. So this tiny little PC, it is getting quite hot. I don't have a heat gun. I'm looking to get in a heat gun so I can test this sort of stuff, the hot spots and stuff. But the case is getting quite hot and I can hear the fans ramping up a bit. But I'm playing Red Dead Redemption 2 on a tiny little PC, which that's pretty impressive in my opinion. Let's move on and see how well this thing can edit. Let's edit a bit of 4K video and then do a bit of light photo editing and see how it handles that. So here we are in Premiere Pro and I've opened the project and all the clips, all the media, which was filmed in 4K for my recent review of the Edifier QR65 speakers. And just trimming through the timeline, it's handling it fine. It's on half playback quality. And this is fine. This is not that much different to my main rig. Let's try and do some playback. I don't have any speakers connected, so we're not going to hear anything. Yeah, this is fine. This Ryzen 7940HS is handling that absolutely no problems at all. So I'm just doing a quick export test on 5 minutes of 4K video from one of my recent reviews from the Edifier review. So on the timeline, as we saw a second ago, scrubbing around through the timeline, that was fine. If we export 5 minutes of video, it says it's going to take around 8 minutes to export that, that's not that bad. It's not as fast as my computer. It's gone down to 7 minutes already. I'm not going to go into any technical benchmarks. That's not what I did for the other mini PC, but the performance of Premiere Pro on this machine is more than suitable for me. I'd be happy using this if I was in a pinch and I didn't have access to my main big computer that I do all of my editing on. I'd be happy using this. It's kind of like I said at the start of the video, a Windows version of a Mac Mini, and I may grab one myself and set up a little workstation away from my main desk, just when I need to go and focus and get some work done, away from the distraction of games. Let's move on to do a quick bit of photo editing, although I'm under no doubt that it will handle that fine. And then we'll move on to my final thoughts and I'll let you know what I think about this thing. So here we are in Photoshop. I've got a PSD that was just lying around on my shared network drive from when I went to Katowice, and there's a few different layers and stuff on there. So we just try and move stuff around a little bit, resize some stuff. It's perfectly fine. It's not lagging at all. This isn't the most advanced Photoshop project at all, but it's handling it with ease. Let's try and add in a quick picture from somewhere else. I have a picture of Dominic I can add in. There we go. There's Dominic's face, massive, in the middle of the screen. And there's quite a few different layers on there now. Text, logos, backgrounds, got some blur on it. There's a lot of different outlines and strokes and outer glows and different effects active on a lot of the layers, and it's handling it fine. We'll just export this image now just to test it. There was a few seconds of lag then. We're going to export it as a PNG at 4K to the desktop, and it's trying, and it's done. That's fine. Photoshop, it'll handle it fine. I would have no issues and no qualms using this as a Photoshop machine. There we go. There is the image that I've just used just as a quick test. So Premiere Pro performance was fine. It wasn't quite as fast as my desktop, but it was perfectly serviceable if I was in a pinch and had no other computer. And it will do for someone learning, starting out and getting started on a YouTube channel, for example, as was Photoshop. Photoshop worked perfectly. There was no lag, no nothing like that. And gaming surprised me. It holding what the frame rates were off the top of my head, I can't remember. 60, 70 in Red Dead Redemption 2 was very, very impressive. So overall, I'm impressed with the performance of this computer. So let's move on and I'll give you my final thoughts before we end the video. So there we have it then. That was my review of the Geekom A7 mini PC. And I've got to say, I'm really impressed with how this little PC performs. The 800 to 900-ish pounds price tag is slightly higher than the last mini PC I looked at. Quite a lot higher, to be fair, the Lever Z5 Plus, but in my opinion, it's worth it. Work-wise, it handled editing and exporting some 4K video with ease, and it didn't skip a beat during some Photoshop work. I feel that's definitely where the strengths of this machine are, in its work capabilities. And then a bonus to add on to that is that it'll handle some decent-ish gaming when the boss isn't looking. That's a win-win in my book. I like the looks of the tiny case too. The aluminium looks really classy. Overall, I really rate this tiny PC, and I might pick one up for myself for a dedicated work machine to take me away from the distractions of my Steam library. But I reckon it'd probably be about an hour before I installed Steam on it anyway. And that's the end of the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave me a like down below if you did. Don't forget to subscribe to KitGuru to keep up with the latest PC gaming news and reviews. And if you go down below the video, you'll find links to our merch store, our Discord server, our Patreon page, and our website if you want to check any of that out. Anyway, guys, I've been Matt. This has been the Geekom A7 mini PC. I will speak to you in the next one. Look after yourselves. See you later.